What's keeping corporate CEOs awake at night? I'll tell you. How about the possibility of an Obama administration tax on their foreign earnings? Half of the S&P 500's earnings come from multinational foreign earnings. Procter & Gamble CEO Bob McDonald says this is his biggest concern right now. So in our Call the Wild, we ask, should there be a tax on foreign profits? We'll go to Greg Bays, CEO of the Illinois Manufacturing Association, and Bernard Whitman, CEO of Whitman Insight Strategies. Mr. Bays, is this a good time to be taxing American corporations, either at home or abroad?
Well, it seems to me it's not a very good idea, and I think in order to get the recovery started, we've got to create jobs here in the U.S., and we've got to make sure that our companies are able to continue to be competitive globally. Government's not going to be re-stimulating this economy. Ford just announced a week or so ago in Chicago that they're creating 1,200 new jobs. The suppliers around that plant are going to be hiring up. That's the kind of stimulus we need, not this idea of trying to tax on profits that are going on in foreign countries, which really sounds good as a populist idea. Bring those dollars back. But let's understand that companies like Caterpillar and Deere are competitive worldwide, and they have to be able to operate in those countries and reinvest their profits in those countries to be able to remain competitive.
Okay, let's take the flip side of that there with Mr. Whitman. I know that you believe that they're just not paying enough tax, these multinationals, and that we need to up the rate.
This is a question of basic fairness. We have a tax code in this country that says if you create a job in Bangalore, India, you should pay less taxes than if you create one in Buffalo. And that is fundamentally anti-small business. It is unfair to small businesses who have largely kept their jobs here in the United States. It encourages large corporations to outsource and ship jobs and production overseas. And it fundamentally allows these companies to put off paying taxes.
I guess the question, let me just jump in, is some might say, do two wrongs make a right?
In other words, they get taxed overseas. Wait a second. Let's get the facts out, Mr. Whitman. I beg your pardon. They get taxed overseas. You see, this is about the double taxation. And Matthew Slaughter of Dartmouth wrote a great piece in last week's Wall Street Journal op-ed saying it's a job creator at home. The Europeans give them a tax credit. Right now, we're trying to take that tax credit away. So this isn't about fairness. This is about double and triple taxing American corporate earnings.
That is absolutely false. This has allowed large multinational corporations to cut their tax responsibility by as much as 50%. And in fact, in 2004, these companies paid $16 billion on $700 billion in earnings.
Oh, stop. We have the highest marginal tax rate. We have the highest marginal business tax rate. We have the highest marginal business tax rate. Go ahead, Mr. Bays. Rebut that for me.
And Larry, you're exactly right. I mean, we have the second highest corporate tax rate in the world. We are taxing our companies where our competitors are not. Do we want the Caterpillars of the world to remain competitive in the U.S., in China, in Europe? If we do, we want them to be able to reinvest in those facilities.
Well, and it sounds
away for a manufacturing plant.
It sounds like Bernard is saying that to a certain extent. Bernard, you said it's just not fair that a company can relocate to India and create jobs there because it costs too much to have them in Buffalo. So why not equal the playing field and lower the tax structure here in the U.S. so that it does make sense to hire people in Buffalo?
Right now, the truth of the matter is right now we are penalizing mom and pop shops by requiring them to pay their fair share of taxes while allowing large corporations to ship jobs overseas and get tax deductions at the same time that they're getting billions of dollars in federal money in bailouts.
I think sounds like you don't like the tax.
By the way, the U.S., we are penalizing small businesses. I beg your pardon, Mr. Whitman. We are penalizing small businesses because we are raising the top small business tax rate up to 40% from 35%. And that is the goofy part of this. But, Mr. Bays, I want to go back to you on this. Why not give them a 5% tax rate, repatriate the foreign earnings, and then just drop the top corporate tax down to 20%, which is closer to Europe, more or less what Trish is saying. In other words, let's bring the capital home, give them a one-time break, which we did about 5 years ago, and then have real tax reform by broadening the base and lowering the rates for large and small businesses to stop this silly class warfare.
The supplier network to our large multinationals are everywhere. And as I described in the Ford example, by them creating more jobs in their facility, that spins off into the supplier network. So when you talk about bringing the money back, those companies bring money back when it is appropriate that they have not invested or they continue to invest in those locations because they're selling around the world. Let's understand, we are exporting our jobs, we're not exporting our jobs, we're creating jobs and being able to expand here in the U.S. as well.
And Mr. Whitman, you're saying, go ahead.
As is typical, the American taxpayer is way ahead of the politicians on this. 2 in 3 American taxpayers don't believe corporations pay their fair share. The truth of the matter is we got $1.5 trillion, $1.5 trillion deficit coming up. Someone has got to pay this bill.
Well, you're not going to get a nickel from this.
It is time that large corporations who benefit disproportionately pay their fair share.
From this. You're not going to get a wooden plug nickel from this. This is one of these wacko liberal ideas. But I want to tell you something, Mr. Whitman. Let me ask you this, honestly, Mr. Whitman. You don't expect the Congress to actually pass this tax hike on corporations. I mean, if the Democratic Congress were to do this, instead of losing 50 seats, they'll lose 90 seats. You know it and I know it. This thing's going nowhere, isn't it?
You know what? The vast majority of jobs in this country are created by small business. It's about time that the American Congress respects small business in the same way that they kowtow to large corporations.
You are using a red
let me just point something out. Mr. Whitman, you're saying it's not fair that these jobs go overseas. That these jobs go overseas. So in other words, why not make the tax structure better in the U.S. so that it is an equal playing field?
Just tax them once. Tax corporate income once and only once. That is the major reform. Go ahead, Mr. Bays, take us out.
Well, and the point is that this the administration's proposal from last February has already changed dramatically. This administration has continued to send a message to American business that you're the enemy. You talk about card check. You talk about cap and trade. You talk about an environmental protection agency out of control. What our companies need in this country is predictability and stability in its tax code, not these kind of continued talking points that we hear to the SEIU and others.
Tax rate incentives. The one thing that has not been tried in all of the employment and unemployment frustration is lowering marginal tax rates for supply-side incentives. It's astonishing to me. It's the one thing they haven't tried.
But the fact is, corporations pay a lower percentage of taxes as a percentage of GDP than in most industrialized nations.
I appreciate it, Mr. Bays. Thank you very much.
All right.
Just thought I'd weigh in.
After the break.
But you're right, Trish. You're right. We need low tax reform. Right here at home. You're exactly right.
If you want to keep jobs here, you got to find a way to incentivize corporations.
Go.